Facebook page. And, you know, the truth about American Spring is that I am very concerned about what and who are involved. Now, Tom Lacavara, who follows this program on Patriot FB, he has been exposing some things, and I've had communication with some insiders directly within Operation American Spring that have given me cause for deep concern. In fact, I interviewed Colonel Riley and I interviewed General Vallely about it. One of the reasons I haven't promoted it too heavily is because, and it's not that I don't love the idea of it, it dovetails in with an article which I wrote and called for back in July of 2013. A year ago, I was trying to do this. But the problem is that the people who are involved in this make me very uncomfortable because of their backgrounds and because of the fact that there's not really a plan for how to move this thing forward properly. I spoke to Colonel Riley. I interviewed him. And I asked him a number of times, what happens when they capitulate? If you look at their website, their mission is the restoration of constitutional government, the rule of law, freedom, liberty of the people, by the people, for the people, from despotic and tyrannical federal leadership. Great. I'm on that. They're expecting somewhere between 10 and 30 million people. That's their hopes. The problem is that the people who were involved, first of all, Colonel Riley is an ex-military, or I shouldn't say, he's military, but he's also an ex-NSA guy. General Vallely is an ex-NSA guy, and although he's not directly tied to the Operation American Spring, he and Riley work very closely on it and its coordination. But I've also received some calls from some people inside the organization that have given me some very, very disturbing information about what is happening with, the fact that Colonel Riley isn't planning to stay for the entire event, which is a problem, and some of the ways in which things have been done over there, including the fact that some of the individuals who are participating in it are current government employees. As an example, one of their executive team is a member of the Department of Defense. Wow. I don't like that. Why? Because you can't have two masters. How's that? And that's that ain't me saying that. That's an age-old concept that, Now, the media has blacked this thing out, which ought to tell you that they're uncomfortable about it. And I like that. There's a couple of papers that are carrying it. RT is carrying it, Russia Today. But Russia Today, is a provocateur against Americans' best interests. RT is, Pravda and TASS of old. But the Washington Times has an article in there, Operation American Spring to hit D.C. to oust Obama, Biden, Boehner, and Holder. A group of self-described revolutionary-style patriots with 1 million mobilized militia members are heading to downtown D.C. this week to bring a sample message to political leadership from President Obama to House Speaker John Boehner. Get out. They're called the Operation American Spring, and they're vowing to oust the likes of Obama, Boehner, Eric Holder, Harry Reid, Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi, and Joe Biden. We're calling for their removal as a start toward constitutional restoration, says retired Army Colonel Harry Riley, leader of the group. They have all abandoned the U.S. Constitution or are unworthy to be retained in a position that calls for servant status. The aim of the group is to influence those politicians who aren't targeted for ouster to, quote, sponsor and pass very constitutionally crafted state legislation to dissolve the size, power, scope, and spending of the U.S. government by 2/3. They expect between 10 and 30 million similarly thinking Americans to meet them in the Capitol on Friday for a rally that's being billed as a sort of an Arab Spring, quote unquote, for Americans. They'll also be holding simultaneously another event the same day at Bunkerville on the Bundy Ranch near the cattle ranch, Cliven Bundy's property, in support of his standoff with the Bureau of Land Management over the grazing issue. Okay. When I interviewed Colonel Riley, I asked him specifically, so what's the plan of action when you go there and 10 million Americans or 1 million or 30 million show up behind you and the list of people that you're ordering to leave actually leave? What's that? What happens then? Well, then we're going to pray about it, was his answer. And I believe in prayer, but that's not a way to run a country. I mean, we can't just say, well, okay, so we're going to snap the rudder off the ship, irrespective of the fact that the rudder is laden with poison, but we're going to snap the rudder off the ship in the middle of the storm, and then we're going to pray for another rudder to suddenly appear? No, we're not going to call the carpenters from down in the hold. We're not going to try to make another rudder. We're just going to pray that God's going to steer us in the right way in the storm. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a mistake. I'm not saying God can't. I'm saying that's a mistake. I asked him over and over and over again, please help me understand what the next steps are. Who have you chosen? Who will be the replacement for these people? If you leave a vacuum, government will be filled. The government vacuum will be filled. Nature and government abhor vacuums. I use that phrase. Nature abhors a vacuum. One cannot exist He could not answer me. And to be frank with you, the entire operation's gone through a number of different iterations. And I'm deeply concerned about the people that have been moving in, if you will, since it began, and the discussion began 6 or 8 months ago. Do I want it to work? Oh, yeah. Will it work? Well, in some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. Let me clarify for you what I mean. Unless the federal government were to attempt some sort of an armed response, I don't think it will work. An armed response would generate the right response from an America that is just fed up with elitists, statists, and totalitarians. But I do believe that what they will do is they will completely load the city with facial recognition camera systems and identification systems in the hopes of identifying who are the troublemakers. And I can't change how I feel about it. I'm sure I'm going to get a ton of flack. I'm sure I'm going to get a ton of email. I'm sure I'm going to have a bunch of people that say to me, you should support this. And I do support it. I don't support the people that are running it. Because I don't trust them. And I don't trust them because they can't answer questions. You can go back and look at the interview I did with General Vallely. At one point in the interview, he said to me, I said, nature abhors a vacuum. We can't have a vacuum. And he said, well, I can create a government overnight. What? That's not exactly what I expected to hear from a general and former NSA member whose primary operational expertise was in PSYOPs. Sorry, we don't need a junta government. And I don't believe America needs to jump out of the frying pan and into the fire. You can't force an American spring. And I think that this doesn't have the appropriate involvement of a core group of individuals in the country frankly, I just I've just got a major challenge with how the entire thing is being operated. I could be wrong, and I will tell you this. If I am wrong, at the end of the day, I'll be the first one to say, I missed this. I missed the boat on it. I should have been on board. I'm at least honest enough with myself, and I owe you that if I'm wrong, I'll admit it. But I've spoken to too many insiders, many of whom have left the organization. Left because of their concerns with the people who were getting involved, with the people who were seemingly able to kind of take the project over, if you will. I don't know how to express my concerns without throwing the entire thing under the bus. I mean, clearly we have descended into tyranny. No denying it. Clearly we have a problem in the sense that our government has become tyrannical. Clearly, we need an uprising of Americans. And if this is the kernel that kicks that off, and I mean the seed kernel, then, I'm great with that. But I can't express strongly enough how deeply unsettled I am about it. I mean, here's an example. Here's Colonel Riley's own Twitter feed. And he's got 35 tweets on it. There's only 384 followers. Okay. I'm concerned that this entire thing is being used as a methodology and a means to identify and develop a list. I mean, look, I'm already on it. I know it. I mean, it goes without saying, right? But, if 5 or 8 or 10 million Americans show up there, let's assume for argument's sake that only 500,000 show up there. It's not enough to get the media to respond. It has to be a minimum of 10 million or it's just a waste of time. That's the simple truth, folks. 10 million and the entire city comes to a screeching halt. The mainstream media cannot ignore it. The Capitol shuts down. Every restaurant is booming. Every federal government building, every city government building is on lockdown because they can't move. The entire city comes to a halt. Everybody's got to take a train home. They're not getting home until the next morning because there's so many people. The trains can't move. The buses can't move. That would be an event. You know why? Because MSLSD, ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox News, Communist News Network, none of them could avoid it. None of them could ignore it. The New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, they'd have to be covering it. But if it's only 30,000 or 50 or 150 or 300 or 500 or 800,000, the nation will never know. What bothers me, I think about it, and I'm sure I'll be called an armchair, whatever. But I think there's a way to do it and a way not to do it. And I've suggested repeatedly that the Tea Party, the Constitution Party, the Libertarian parties get together, everybody but the Republican and the Democrat parties, and they create an entity that will actually pre-qualify and vet qualified people to replace those people, because we cannot have a void. Now, I've suggested repeatedly that we have, and that these Tea Party the Tea Party and all these other organizations I mentioned, that they put money up to run national campaigns around the country that say, we are seeking qualified candidates to replace the dysfunctional members of Congress and create a new government called the New Republican, or the New Republic, and I don't mean Republican as in party, the Republican government, the United States of America. The constitutional republic. And take applications from individuals in marketplaces where the representative or the senator would come from. And not just take out the top 8, all 535, ladies and gentlemen. Find a senator, 2 senators from every of the 50 states. There you go. Now you got 100 senators. Are you going to have to qualify them, pre-vet them? Yes. Are you going to have to interview them and run them through exactly what a campaign process would be? Absolutely. Do you have to make sure that they don't have any skeletons in their closet that would later on cause them to be a problem? Absolutely. And each of them has to sign an agreement that stipulates, I'm only running until such time as official constitutional elections can be held. And then I am finished. That's it. But to do it as a free-for-all, I don't think is smart. Not unless the government starts shooting or something. Then all bets are off, ladies and gentlemen. But it is still a nation where people have to get up and get to school the next morning or get to their job. They've got to feed their families. We've got international threats. And I ain't talking about some stupid knucklehead who's trying to sneak in across the Mexican border so he can strap a bomb on his chest after getting over here on some, ship somewhere, and he can walk into some store and pull the chain and commit a homicide murder. I'm talking about real threats like China, Russia, OPEC, our Federal Reserve, and every central bank on the planet. That's real threat. We're in trouble, folks. And I don't think a couple of guys from PSYOP days of the NSA, I don't think they're our saviors. I asked you the other day to pray for a George Washington. I don't think these guys are it. If I'm wrong, I'll say so. But I don't think these guys are it. You should. We collectively should be praying for a George Washington to rise up among us. A man of honor, or a woman of honor, integrity, respect, firm courage of conviction in the face of what will be and promises to be incredible temptation and coercion and duress. And be able to stand firm and say, I'm going to do the right thing. That is our only hope. Free-for-all is not the right way. And I suspect that if this thing gets a critical mass there, don't put it past government to go out there and create a problem that doesn't exist using provocateurs. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. You can communicate with me by email at mike@americasvoicenow.org. That's mike@americasvoicenow.org. See you on Monday. God bless you. Have a good weekend. Pray for a Washington. We need one now more than ever.